I'm John Atek.
Mm.
Everybody knows that. And this is my now good friend, Jeremy Sherman, and he's rehydrating,
I
at
am.
fast speed. Now, Jeremy,
I wasn't breastfed as a kid.
that's it. It's an oral fixation.
It's an oral fixation.
Oh,
Actually, it's a moral fixation, but that's a
yeah.
different thing.
And in Freud's case, a moron fixation, but there we go.
That's true. That too.
Oh, yeah. So, Jeremy, dear man, um, you've done a series of videos. When we first recorded, because we first met
Yeah.
years ago, but when we first recorded, um, you were pleased that week that you'd had 1,000 views on a video. And then a couple of weeks later, you said, oh, I've had 10,000 views on a video. And now it's going wild. People.
That's right. That's right. I'm now famous among
And
more than 15 people, but
yeah,
not many more. By the way, there are, I mean, my channel ain't nothing compared to what there is, but it's still nice to have some people who seem to get it. I like being gotten.
yeah. It's, when our mutual friend Yuval recorded with me and I a few years ago, and I apologized to him that he only had 500 views. He said, I've never talked to more than 50 people before. And I'd never thought about it that way, that, yeah, it's more than a classroom, so it's okay. Um, but anyway, you've launched a series of attacks on the former president, the Lord Protector of cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, as I have now redubbed him. And I've got to say, I'm going to admit this. This is absolutely public, that when the 2016 election happened, I'd been finding out everything I could about Trump because I thought he was fascinating. And the idea that somebody who apparently the brain transplant had failed and his brain didn't function anymore. He couldn't finish sentences. He couldn't pass grammar. He forgot what he was talking about mid-sentence. I mean, Joe Biden joined him with that more recently. So I was fascinated by this guy, and I watched all of the video I could about him, and a lot of it was his friends saying what a dreadful person he was. Like, and then he became president, and it wasn't funny anymore. But I have various friends in America, and they're sort of, oh no, you probably better not talk about him because you might lose part of our audience. And I'm kind of okay, fine. This guy exemplifies so much. He is such a dreadful human being. He is so utterly shallow. We're seeing great clips. Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, Seth Meyers. He's, they're not going to have anything. They're not going to have any material once this if he doesn't get elected and he goes back into the wilderness. What a comedian's going to feed on from now on? Because it's been every day some other wonderful, bizarre, remarkable thing. Now, we talked about our differing approaches, and different horses for different courses. We have to accept that a lot of my work, I've spent 40 years talking with escapees, largely from the Scientology group. I've worked directly with about 600 people in that time. A few of them were fanatics, and my job was to bring them down so that they could look at things from a different perspective. And that's it's more like a kind of hostage negotiator approach. You're being very gentle and taking people there. Your approach is to roll trolls and do things with Trumpists, stump them, in fact. And getting to the fifth part, where you actually start opening up your techniques, the way your approach seems to be one of deep sarcasm, where you reflect back to the person, which is beautifully made, by the way. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's
Thank
really
you.
phenomenal. But there's you sat in the chair with the MAGA hat and the glass of bourbon. I hope it is.
I hope
Um,
it was.
how would we
I
know?
didn't drink it. I didn't drink it. It
No,
was a prop set up by my large staff. I have no idea what was
yeah,
in
your
it.
extensive staff. Um, yeah, it was probably cold tea, everyone. Let's bear in mind that Hitler was a teetotaler, and so drinking is a bad thing. He was a
Yeah,
vegetarian
and
too.
Trump is a teetotaler too, though,
Yeah, well,
though addicted to other drugs. Um,
Adderall, I'm told, is a major
yeah,
part of
and
his diet.
also a central theme for me is that playing God is easier than being human if you can
Mm,
get away with it. It pays off extremely handsomely,
mm.
and it's extremely addictive. I mean, obviously, we're talking about it's a parallel to addiction. You can do addiction just with ideas, obviously.
Yeah, and as you
So
say, heroin was called heroin because it was a drug that for heroes, and
it made people feel like heroes. That's
yeah,
why it was originally called heroin. Yeah.
mm. and
So,
as for morphine, I'm not so sure. It makes people feel they're a different shape, possibly. I don't know, but
well, no, I mean, I have myopium is a term I coined for the pain-killing effects of short-sightedness, of myopia.
mm, I did notice that one, and I know that you are tasked by your religious principles to invent a new word, a neologism every day,
It's
which is often
true.
as not a portmanteau word, and I do love
It's
the idea.
often a portmanteau. It's what
Very
yeah,
often.
it's what they call a conceptual blend in the cognitive sciences.
A
Um, uh,
conceptual blend.
yes, and I'm about to produce an article about how to coin terms. It's been very useful for my thinking. I thought it would take over the world and everybody would soon be speaking my new language, but no, I am inside my head.
Yeah, I think James Joyce thought we'd all be talking Finnegan's Wake, but it hasn't happened yet, you know.
Yes, I'm not that crazy.
No.
Anyway, so go ahead. You were introducing things before you were so
Yeah,
rudely interrupted by yourself.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we had perma-affirmed. I quite like that, but permanently affirmed. And this concept that, of course, you're extending it more widely. The hero bot, or as you've elsewhere used the term Trump bot, it is a quite normal human behavior to believe that your faith means that you're superior and that you don't have to worry about the hard questions because the clever person who's in charge of you has already worked all the answers out, the bishop or political leader or whoever you have sold your soul to. Um, and you, as you say, you have this this creates the hero bot, this state. So I think my first question is about that um, to what extent are we all hero bots? To what extent are we all buying into a
Yeah,
mythology?
yeah, yeah. So it's central for me, and also I want to speak to what you said earlier about your fascination with Trump, my fascination with Trump, everyone's fascination with Trump, and how he's pulling it off. But I
Everybody will
think
be very happy with what we do.
well,
I don't know
um,
anything about. I know everything. I know more about that. So, sorry.
so I did this series on how to roll trolls and stump Trumpists, and then I'm following it up with a series on irony,
Mm,
because there are some real well, because I think irony is fundamental, and there
mm,
is a tendency for some of us to gloat. For those of us who oppose tyrants or
mm.
Scientology or any of those things, um, to feel rather chuffed about our superiority, as though egomania is beneath us.
Yeah.
So I hate haters, which proves I don't hate.
Mm,
That kind of a
yeah.
situation, the conundrums that follow from taking it one step further
Mm,
to looking at all of the moral questions as all the moral principles as paradoxes.
mm,
You know, commit yourself to flexibility. Do not be negative. You shouldn't be judgmental. All of them. And so I really want to tease out the last video I put out on Saturday morning was where do you get off? That
mm,
is, you can stack this stuff higher and higher. That is, for every argument, you can make another argument against it. That
yeah.
is what I call the last word paradox,
Mm,
which is that words compel us to claim last words, which further words make impossible.
mm,
Um, but anyway, what I would say that the alternative to egomania is not selflessness, it's egomania adjacency. That is, we are all tempted
mm,
to alleviate doubt by whatever means. Doubt is extremely painful. Doubt, anxiety, uncertainty, all of that. The original meaning of xenophobia was fear of uncertainty, not just fear of foreigners.
yeah.
Um, and we need a word that means fear of uncertainty because it's part of the human condition.
Mm,
Um, uh, given given language as we have evolved it, we can imagine anything. All the threats and missed opportunities. I think of us as FOMO sapiens, fear of missing out, is just fundamental to us. And so our need for reassurance is way greater than even the most doting dog. It and we need to also not feel like we need reassurance. That is, it's buzzkill to think that you're needy. So it's almost a black market, the affirmationomic situation, our economy of supply and demand for affirmation. And if you really want to track people's behavior, that's the human condition. We are all tempted in that direction. And someone could say, speak for yourself, Sherman. Egomania is beneath me. Yeah, I understand. I understand that temptation too. The pretense of selflessness would be an attraction for any of us. In the meantime, you've got Donald Trump, who comes on the scene and is what I think of him as the first dumbergogue. That is, he's a demagogue, but he's doing it in a new way that we haven't seen before. He's flaunting stupidity, which not only makes stupid people feel smart, like they could do it too. It's the equivalent of what in music happened when GarageBand came along, which is you feel like you're a musician because you can press a few buttons. Some of them really are musicians, those electronic musicians, but not all of them. The barriers to entry got low, and everybody can feel like they're a superstar for being able to make beats.
Yeah,
so
and you've then got auto tune and all
that's
stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's one of the effects of technology in general, is that we offload more and more onto technology, freeing ourselves up. In a way, it does make us smarter, or at least it allows our brains to atrophy. But he's got something else going on, which is it's interesting that there aren't great words for evil plus stupidity combined. The closest I can find are dumbass and ignoramus, with an N. Which I didn't coin, but I would have if I had.
You would, yeah.
I would. It's my kind of term. But anyway, we don't have words for it, but they do feed each other. That is, it is a spiral that works well together. I think of Trump as the first dumbergogue. That is, it's an unprecedented approach to being a demagogue, which is you dumb things down as far as possible, and you exploit the high status of being dumb and a hypocrite. It is really high status. That is, kings, potentates, billionaires, they don't have to care what's true. They are freed from cognitive dissonance. That's what you buy when you have wealth, is that you don't have to care. You're buffered against consequences. So it's very appealing and on many fronts, and it's related to a certain spiral. I've noticed that there are very few terms that combine stupidity with nastiness or assholery. There's dumbass, and there's the term ignoramus, which I didn't coin, but it's a term that combines the two. They feed on each other. The dumber you are, the nastier, the more you are likely to lash out at anyone in your way. And the more success you have with that, the dumber you can afford to be. In fact, it becomes very costly to be smart. That is, to pull off that degree of nastiness, you need to have made your conscience dormant. You have to put it to sleep. I don't think of all assholes as psychopaths who lack conscience. No, what they got is a conscience that is permanently reassured, usually by some master excuse.
Robert Hare, in the great master of the psychopathic condition, has pointed out that he differentiates now between sociopaths and psychopaths, and that the sociopath is a psychopath, but with a slight hint of conscience. And
yeah, I would make a different distinction. He's welcome to that one. That's fine. But I would make a different distinction. it's not about the hint of conscience. It's not about how much conscience you've got. So he would probably be making a more an argument. I mean, in a way, it could be like, well, if you have a little bit of conscience, you can shut it up easily. That might be but I would be clearer about the mechanism. I think they have a fully working conscience that is permanently reassured. Usually by a master excuse. And the master excuse would be no deed too dirty for exes like me. No deed too dirty for a patriot like me or a Christian like me or whatever. That is, you can put it into that kind of state of permanent reassurance, and also with a combination of that and method acting, you can also claim permacred. That's one of the fascinating things about Trump. Regardless of whether he ends up paying any legal costs for it, he pays no cost in terms of losing or ceding any moral high ground. He continues to play the moral authority. He continues to blare his moral police siren at everybody else with no consequence to his no consequences to his credibility. At least with those people who support him. No deed too dirty for a saint like me is basically the point with him. So and the effect is riveting, not just for his fans, but for his opponents. And recently I've drawn a parallel. I don't know if you've ever done this, but when I get a shot, like a vaccine or something, I'll pinch myself because you can distract yourself with another source of pain. It's quite effective. So you come up with a non-threatening source of pain that it's basically threat displacement. This is more threatening than this. My attention goes here. So that's one of the effects of it. The other is schadenfreude. That is, I think for all of us, there's a question when we see someone else's misfortune about whether it's a substitute for ours. They have pain and it proves we won't. Or whether it's a compliment, meaning that their pain, they're but for the grace of God go I, kind of a thing. Okay, well, we would much prefer the former, and what's one of the reasons why we like comedy. We watch Doofus as like a Will Ferrell character and think we're nothing like that. And how we feel about death. I've confessed that I have a completely maniacal delusion that death is for losers and I'm an exception.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I feel that way wholeheartedly.
I can sell you a certificate that proves that if you want.
That's right. Well, one of those certificates would be if you were a member of a church that said you were granted eternal life through your membership.
And you can come and have dinner at Mar-a-Lago if you give me enough money.
Exactly. And Trump will never die. So the appeal is strong, and so is the revulsion, and both of them keep us riveted on it. We're dealing with this right now. It's one of the challenges after the debate. We haven't learned what Kamala Harris did. She didn't take the bait from him. She didn't try to explain something to a guy who is robotically avoiding, it's willful misinterpretation. She didn't do any of that, and she didn't, her laughing was limited. She kept her eye on the ball. In the meanwhile, the world has gone crazy with this cat and dog viral stuff about Springfield, Ohio, including all of my friends within the resistance. And this Pete Buttigieg, who's an important new thinker over here about all these matters, says that that's part of his strategy. His strategy is to keep us all riveted on anything but his policies.
What policies?
Right. Well, what policies?
You've got 9 years to think about this, Mr. President.
That's right. No, so
we have concepts of a plan.
Right. But even that, I want to point out, even that is missing the point. He's a useful idiot to a movement that definitely has policies, authoritarian policies. So we've got Project 2025, right? So
I know nothing about Project 2025.
Right. So and notice what I want you to notice, because I feel it too, is the glee of pointing out this stuff. That's what I'm saying, is that the resistance is also riveted by it. We find it endlessly fascinating. If he does go down, a bunch of us are going to have postpartum blues. we've enjoyed this, and it's also one of the dangers of having stupid rivals. It tends to make people gloat. Um,
Well, as Hitler said, and it's time we mentioned Hitler, never think that your enemies are stupid.
right. I'm trying to think about how that applies here.
Always
Um,
accept the idea that your enemies might be intelligent and think about what they're actually planning. So while Trump is the
yeah,
front man for Project 2025, though frankly, having seen the various bits of Project 2025, all of the
right,
people involved in it look stupid. Is there
right.
some mastermind behind this somewhere? You know?
Well, there's a master temptation, and there's also the smart idiots who are very clever at implementing stupid stuff. Um, uh, that'd be a standard issue for all of us. But yes, whether he's dumb or dumb like a fox remains a question. And in a way, my point. So Maggie Haberman, who's the master Trump whisperer over here, was asked about Pete Buttigieg's theory. He had said that this is all designed to distract us, and she was a little dismissive. She said, "Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily that much strategy involved." She
No.
quoted Trump in private saying that people think I'm playing 3D chess when I'm really just eating the pieces. Um, my my point about all of that is that it's a temptation that pays really well if you can get away with it. And at his scale, not only can you get away with being dumb, you can continue and succeeding, you can continue to rig the system so that it gets easier and easier to do that. So I don't disagree with her. That is, he doesn't have to have a master strategy. They don't even have to have a master strategy, but everything converges into a very sweet package for them. And I would say that another, just a side point, and then I'll be quiet, is
No, you won't. No, you won't.
I, promises, promises. um, uh, Everybody cries for freedom, but there's a distinction between those who want exclusive freedom, like those guys, and people who want inclusive freedom. And one of the ways that they've kept us tongue-tied for years is this thing about inclusive freedom. It's because on the one hand, we want them to have their freedom because we want everybody to have freedom, and we don't make this distinction that no, I don't want them to have freedom if they think it's freedom exclusive to everybody else's freedom. We got to get nastier about that, which comes full circle to where the thing we were beginning to talk about, which is which I have a video coming out soon. I see three main strategies. They're the ones you get as advice from parents about dealing with bullies. One is ignore them, go away, don't talk, never fight with the pig. You'll just get dirty, and the pig likes it.
Yeah.
Another one is you've got to reach out to them human to human and make a connection. And the other one is the one, somehow in a way, this is the one I'm referring here to, the one that I've heard more of from you, and I love it. I believe in it wholeheartedly, or actually one-thirdedly, in that I think that all three of these strategies make sense. So a parent tells a kid, just ignore the bully, he'll go away. You'll suck the oxygen out of it. Parents will tell the kids, try to make friends with him, and that way, you'll discover that you'll soften them up. This was very popular in the 1960s, the assumption that there's a win-win solution to all win-lose situations, because actually they're just misunderstandings.
The
And the
Esalen
third,
Institute way of life. Yeah.
exactly, which was exactly what you'd expect from a cushy society where you can get away with that, where people can be trusted to some extent. I lived on a commune for 7 years. I know that feeling. But it also makes you easy marks for a manipulator if one comes along, because you're all kind of docile. And the third is the one that I teach the most. But when I'm doing my strategic coaching to someone about how to deal with someone they find overbearing, we look at all three of those strategies, the upsides and downsides of applying them to their particular situation, which we spend some time trying to understand, and what combination to use. Now, one combination, see, I told you, my promises are worthless. They're worthless. I'm still talking. um,
That's fine.
One of my favorites is what I call carrot sticking, which is you are extremely loving and kind to the person while giving them a complete ration of shit about what they bought into. That is, you use a combination of a carrot and a stick. Now I'm done.
Okay, that's
And
good.
that's another thing.
Yeah. And by the way,
And by the way, and
yeah,
furthermore,
different horses for different courses.
right,
That you have to approach, trying to use a cookie cutter approach to a situation, especially when it's communication with another human being, will fail. The first part of my method is improvisation.
well, good. That's good. And by the way, notice how many people who tell you how to deal with narcissists have a singular formula.
Oh yeah, I mean Craig Malik and the narcissism is the measure of how special you feel. This is from Harvard Med School. That you have
Right.
people who feel too special, and then you have what he calls healthy narcissism, where you feel just narcissistic enough, and then you've got egoism, where you don't want anybody to know it's your birthday or give you a cake, and yeah, these formulae that you can then apply to dealing with borderline
Right.
people or narcissists or psychopaths, yeah, all very interesting. But if you then take away that idea and say you're dealing with a human being, and while there are certain general traits among human beings that it's useful to understand, it really is, there are things they'll do to you. It's also important to realize that you're dealing with a unique human being. There's nothing new in the universe, but there are no two snowflakes that are the same. And I say that as a snowflake myself, obviously.
Obviously, I've known that about you. It's why I push you around so much. Um, uh, this is one of the paradoxes. So two things. Yes, it's improvisation, but it's the most challenging improvisation I can think of. I see how to. So the big question is, how do you humbly humble people who will say or do anything to avoid humility? And I consider if we don't solve that, uh, humanity is doomed.
Well,
That is,
as hang on, Donald Trump said in Think Like a Champion, one thing that people don't know about me is how humble I am. And that was, in fact, a true statement. We don't know that.
well, that's where I was going with this. So I just want to make clear, these are people who will do anything to make you wrong and them right.
Yeah.
Trump is running on nothing but getting away with pretending he's always right. That's his appeal. That's what's maddening about him. And so they have got a strategy for deflecting any challenge that comes their way. Uh, this is really hard work. Um, to figure out what to do with them. And it's hard work for something fundamental in psychology, which was what spawned the behaviorist movement, which is the recognition that we actually have no objective way to tell what's really going on with a person. Self-reporting bias is a major problem in psychology. For a while, they thought, well, let's just stay away from interiority and completely. Let's just think
Black
about
box.
yeah, black box input-output device, right? Okay, that didn't work either. So imagine the challenge we're up against when we can't tell whether someone is um, dumb or dumb like a fox. There's plenty of innocent evil in the world, and there are Machiavellian people whose game is to con everybody. You can't necessarily tell what you're dealing with. The response to either of those types would be opposites. One would call for more tenderness, the other one would call for more abrasiveness. And the point is, in psychology, it's guesswork, trying to figure out what's actually going on with them. I do have some suggestions around how to deal with that, with my clients, I make it clear we're trying to figure out what works. It's guesswork, and anything we try could not work because they're hell bent on it not working. That's the whole game. That's all they've got going,
Yeah.
is to live doubt free, to externalize all doubt. If there's anybody who should doubt, it's anybody but me.
Yeah. I mean, I think your videos have been excellent in defining the problem and giving insight into what's happening. The question I have is, how successful is your method? How many MAGA supporters have you convinced to not vote?
Yeah, and that is not the goal here. I mean, it is.
Yeah. Okay. What is the
Sorry,
goal?
that is the goal.
Mm.
But I also recognize what I'm up against. So
Mm.
my aim is to disappoint them, right? Because they come at you. I think of them like exhibitionists. They sidle up as if for a conversation, and then when they've got their attention, they show off their stiff little self-certainty.
Yeah, the raincoat
Okay,
opens.
and the whole
and it's
point
not
of
Columbo, people. It's not Columbo inside that raincoat.
and the whole point is that they have the confidence to do this. These are often shy people who gain the confidence because they have a formula for making you fail and them feel victorious no matter how you respond. Okay, so if you leave, you're a loser who can't, who can't handle the heat and doesn't believe in kumbaya. If you chide them, then they get turned into a petulant brat and say you're mean to them. If you try to talk to them, you're a sucker who fell for it. One way or another, they've got a formula that makes it so you're wrong and they're right.
But of course, this is the nature of cult members. I mean, I'm not particularly keen on the term cult, but this is, extremist authoritarian sects. Let's use my friend Christian Churko's expression of this thing. This is what I deal with. This is, I don't deal with it that much anymore, but I've had years of talking with people who absolutely believe they're right, absolutely believe they have.
I wouldn't use the term belief. I actually make a point of never using the words think or believe about what's going on with them, because I don't think that's what's going on.
You don't think that you should use the word think. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying that there's a difference between belief and relief. They relieve in it. They don't believe in it. They don't. Yeah. I mean, this is the whole point about the roboticness of it, that it becomes a formula. Think is a funny word. Think means to wonder. It also means to know and not wonder. And belief is it's a terribly blunt instrument. We use it about people who have done careful study of contradicting opinions and come to some judgment, and someone who basically says, I don't know, I'll have whatever they're having. I don't care.
Let's undercut. Let's look to William James and the concept of noesis, and let's say that whatever words we're going to use, people have the sense of certainty. They have the belief that they know something. The example I always give: I was 17 years old, just born again, spent 2 hours talking with me. I had a perfectly pleasant conversation, very friendly. Asked him certain questions about the gospel that he had problems with, and as he backed away from me, making sure that I wouldn't leap upon him and tear him limb from limb. As he backed away from me, he said, I don't understand the Bible, but I know it's all true. Now, whether we call that belief or relief, people grab hold of an idea and they then say, I'm certain, I'm confident, I absolutely know that my Redeemer lives.
I understand.
And so I don't see any significant difference in the way that we don't even know at the end of the sentences yet, Jeremy. That's amazingly
I believe I do. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't see that there's a significant difference between the class of the MAGA supporter and the class of the Nazi or the class of the Scientologist.
I completely agree with you.
In terms of violence, yes. But in terms of that,
but I think
I dwell within certainty,
No, that's right. So confidence levels, that is how certain you are of something.
Yeah.
That's real. And we agree on that. Yeah. But I do see a difference. I think you pulled off a bait and switch, and rightly so. I want to tell you, because I said I disagreed, and then you changed the topic to something completely different.
I finished the sentence that you were disagreeing with.
I know, but it was not the sentence. That's not the sentence.
It was the sentence I was speaking. It may not have been the one you were prophesying.
I had a confidence on the fault for not letting you finish the sentence. I am deeply uncouth.
Yes,
But
you
I just,
are.
but
Deeply
I am.
angry.
It's one of the
Yes.
problems with me.
Yeah.
Um,
Insufferable is the word you use.
Insufferable. That's right. No, I actually consider myself a hyper conscientious brute. So let me apologize for interrupting you so rudely. But
Yeah.
I do want to get back to what you were talking about
Mm.
right before you finished that sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. So confidence level is one thing.
Mm.
And yes, I agree with you that the confidence level is high among Nazis and MAGA. And what I'm trying to distinguish is something that goes on for all of us,
Mm.
which is
Sure.
we make it's basically thinking fast versus thinking slow. Um,
You would have to bring Daniel Kahneman into this.
no, we wouldn't have to, but
No, let me just cite what Kahneman said about that. It's a metaphor. That's Kahneman's own description of thinking
no,
fast and
that's right.
thinking slow.
And be that as it may, I think there is something to going with the gut, intuition, and versus deliberation.
You use the
Which
word
is
think. You use the word think again, which is a word you've just told me you
no,
don't use.
no, no. Please understand me, my friend. I think a lot. You
Hmm.
think sometimes.
No, never.
Okay,
Never. I
but
have
I don't.
certainty.
But I would not use that about the confidence levels that you see in Trumpists, cultists, and Marxists or Nazis. Uh,
Extremists of any sort.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay. So, and I wouldn't use the word extremist for other reasons. I'm incredibly fussy.
You
Um,
are.
I have a redefinition of extremist, but let me just get this point across because
We're
this
not
is
going to
where we
get
started.
sextremist as a portmanteau word here, are we?
I'm
Thank
not.
God
I
for that.
know you
Or
could.
hextremist, or maybe, or
No, but
lextremist, as we're talking about words.
we'll come up with one. I do like the term pornostalgia though, which is a pornography that appeals to you because it allows you to reminisce about when you cared.
And you gave us
Anyway,
scornography as well. We have to acknowledge that.
and then yeah, that's right. And I did coin one that scornography. That did you
Mm.
just say that? There
I
you go.
did,
There you go.
yeah. I like
There we
that
go.
one the last time we
Good.
talked. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I'm trying to get at
Mm.
is this important distinction for me between I'd like to reserve, I'd like to make a distinction between careful deliberation where you've had the opportunity and maybe aren't education deprived or whatever, the curiosity to wonder before you decided versus
Ratiocination. There's
that's
already a
right.
word for it. Yeah.
That's right.
Several.
And also what ratio nation and rationality are
Mm.
really about,
Yeah.
from my perspective, is comparisons, ratios,
Yeah.
this compared to that. So it's shopping for your interpretation
Mm.
rather than impulse buying your interpretation. And therefore, I make an assessment when I'm dealing with someone about whether they've shopped or not,
Mm.
whether they actually spend any time shopping before they made an impulse purchase. And I described how a lot of people come to their beliefs, which is, I don't know, I'll have what everybody else is having,
Mm.
whatever locals. So, so shopistemology, how you shop for your interpretation,
Mm.
is a fundamental challenge with humans. And it's just way easier to fall into whichever belief is most affirming.
Mm.
Which is why affirmationomics or egonomics is so important to me. It's why I pay so much attention. They say nobody leaves money on the table. I'd say nobody leaves affirmation on the table,
Mm.
and they'll keep it under the table. That is because it is not affirming to admit that you went into something for the affirmation. I
Mm.
had to coin the term uh, libigo
Mm.
for the ego affirmation side. And I don't think of ego as a bad term. And I also think it's a wrong term. We're actually talking about id when we're talking about ego. We get all confused about that. But what I'm saying is it's actually more shameful. Libigo is more shameful than a sexual drive. A guy is going to say, yeah, I needed to marry someone because I needed to get nookie. Much easier, they're going to say, I needed to marry someone because I needed a chronic source of affirmation.
Mm.
Okay, but it's real, it's
And
big.
look what I got.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other topic. I mean, it's actually a topic I wrote about yesterday, the future of sex.
Mm. You think
But
it has a
anyway,
future?
yes, but I think it may be more. I think it may be trending away from what I call romantic fundamentalism, which is the
Mm.
assumption that sex is highly correlated with love.
Mm.
But it's a touchy subject, and besides, it's off topic here. And I
Yes.
want to stay on message and just keep talking and talking. Go ahead, it's your turn.
No, no. Whatever more you have to say is fine.
Fine,
I,
good then.
yeah, and it will be endless. But yeah, I'm focused on just one thing. I'm focused on
Please.
just one thing, which is how can we get through to people so that on the 5th of November, which is a day when my compatriots
Yeah.
celebrate burning a man on a bonfire, because sadly he failed to blow up the king and all the politicians and a 2 square mile area of London we're told the gunpowder would have taken out. But that's what we'll be doing on that day. We'll be celebrating burning a guy on a bonfire who didn't kill our king.
We're talking
Whereas
about Guy Fawkes Day, is it?
Guy
Guy Fawkes
Fawkes,
Day?
Guido Fawkes, bless him, he was disemboweled before they burned him, of course, because we have classic traditions in this country, and tradition's a wonderful thing. But on that day, America will be deciding, and it may well be that the Swifties can't actually swing the vote enough. It may well be that the electoral colleges will go a certain way, and you might end up with Donald J. Trump as president. Now, while I accept all of the, we're amused by him and all of that stuff, I am not quite stupid enough not to realize that this is going to be a catastrophe. And let me also say, as somebody who's been saying for years, I don't trust either side in this match. I have no affection for the Clintons. I have no affection for Joe or Hunter Biden.
Which is kind of beside the point you're trying to make, but I understand.
I don't think it is because I'm adding something to the point, which is that when Kamala Harris stepped forward, I went, oh no. And then I went and found out as much as I could about her and then about Walz. And something weird happened to me that has not happened in my lifetime before. Political choices in my lifetime have always been the lesser of two evils. And I got the idea that you might actually, in your benighted country, have the chance of getting a president and vice president who seem to be human beings, who seem to be clever, who seem to have achieved things and done something. The undue influence statute for the elderly in California is a major achievement. In my field, it's something we long for, that people will protect the elderly and the vulnerable against what is mistakenly being called coercive control. It's not actually coercive, misdefinition there, but exploitative persuasion, undue influence. So I see that, the titanic battle between good and evil that Zarathustra launched into the world and became Manichaeism and has dogged us ever since is actually taking place in America. Is there something we can do besides public masturbation, as you've put it, besides us doing public masturbation to say how clever we are and how stupid they are, or something like that? What can we do that can actually change people's minds in this instance?
Well, great question, and I have some ideas.
Good. I hoped you would, because otherwise we wouldn't have had this conversation.
Got it. So I'll start by addressing what you just said, because I actually think that there's a problem in the United States. I encounter a fair amount of it, perhaps a disproportional amount of it, given who I've dealt with. It's a kind of vanity voting, where none of these candidates are good enough for us, and we use phrases like lesser of two evils, which is downright unfortunate, because many choices in life are actually ones where there is a new cost imposed. So, for example, if I had an inspector come by and tell me I have cracks in the foundation of my house, I have two choices, neither of which are evil, but it is a lesser of two evils choice. That is, I either pay $10,000 to get it repaired, or I neglect it and the house is in trouble. So I don't like the use of evil there. The idea that the lesser of two evils is still evil is bullshit. It's vanity bullshit. So I
But
want
I,
to.
no, you see, I'm talking about a personal
No, I
reflection here,
understand. I
which is
understand.
that
I
I can.
understand.
Do you want to go
I
through
understand.
all of
No,
the presidents in my
no,
lifetime,
no, no,
all of
no,
the
no,
prime
no.
ministers? I can
I
show
hear
you
you.
the evil that was
I'm with
committed.
you. And if
Yeah.
I were in charge of the world, I would have good, decent people like me in charge, and not these lesser, unfortunate people. That's not the world we live in.
But
I'm no
no, I think it
longer.
is. I think there have been good leaders. I think there have been moral and
Bear
like
with me,
like
please.
Gladstone or Neville Chamberlain, who actually did the right
Bear
thing and
with
helped
me.
people. And there's also been extraordinary rendition, Guantanamo Bay.
You
These
you've lost me. Because I want to make a different point, which
Sure.
is and I wonder if you can appreciate it. Maybe looking at the our alternative our what do we call it? Alternative number, our opposite number. The Trumpists are vanity voters. That is, no leader has been good enough to them. It's how we got Nader and lost Al Gore, who was a decent guy,
Ish.
far better than Bush.
Yeah, ish.
Is the sense that there
Lesser of two evils over
right,
Bush.
that's right. A pox on both houses is an easy, glib thing to say that doesn't recognize that the real challenge is what's the most we can do with what we're dealt. And what we're dealt is a system that has already, like all systems do, fallen towards corruption. They do. This is what happens. That
Entropy
is
is natural within any system.
whatever collective decisions we make that are fortunate, they will be undermined over time by people who demand exclusive freedom. Uh,
Or they will be refined over time by people who demand the good, which is why our legal system is more protective
I
now.
know, but we have a problem in this country right now, and I don't want to reside here because this is not my answer to your question. This is a sidebar.
Yeah.
But we do have a problem in this country, which is the people who will vote for an RFK or a Jill Stein, enough to shave off the votes because they don't understand the system and they're sitting back in their armchair, like fat feeding fish. They'll just take what it's none of it's good enough for them, and it's understandable we're in this position in this country because, for one thing, infrastructure has been stable for a long time for many of us. So we can get comfortable and cushy. We can do the kind of confidence thing that people did in Esalen, where they extrapolated, because I am safe here, the whole world could do what I'm doing, which is be, no recognition that you couldn't do that in Maoist China, no recognition you could do it in Russia, that you couldn't do that in Russia. That corruption happens, and the question becomes, what's the most you can do with what we're dealt? Let me get to that question.
Yeah.
So one of the things is the one I just mentioned, which is disappointing the chuffness of those who call it a lesser of two evil. Try to get them to sober up about how actually we're stuck dealing with a corrupt system, and we have a grandfathered in fossilized system that doesn't apply anymore. We're stuck with that in the United States. But here's the other points are different, and they relate to your point about improvisation. I think the time has come for us to give them a taste of their own medicine, by saying, you're doomed. See, these guys have been preening for a decade now, as if they've already won a battle that we're in the middle of.
How will it stop them getting into power doing this?
Well,
that's my question. How do we stop Trump from winning?
No. First of all, I don't.
How do we unchuff people, or
No, but once again, I don't know that we can, but I also agree with Obama that it's not the end of the world till the end of the world. The question you're dealing with is, how do you tip things as much as you humanly can? What's the most you can do with what you're dealt? And what I'm suggesting here is a way to deal with that. I don't spend much time speculating about which way it'll go. I am post angst and post outrage about this stuff. That stuff isn't useful. I'm trying to be strategic. And you don't see criminologists fretting about the existence of criminals. You don't see oncologists fretting about the existence of cancer. They assume them and they're trying to deal with them. So that's the game I'm playing. I don't want to get distracted. All hands on deck. Okay. In the meantime, what I'm suggesting, there are two main strategies I would suggest. One is um, uh, you expose their overall game, which Kamala Harris did well. I don't think she did it perfectly. I think she missed opportunities for coup de grace. She could have said some things like, there he goes again, or she could have said something like, you're such a drama queen. There are ways to cut him that she cut him the second time, because the successes we've had at undermining these assholes in the past has come when we've actually silenced them on stage. The best example that comes to mind is when Joseph Walsh, the head of the army, said in public hearings to Joe McCarthy, have you no decency, sir, at long last? And he didn't know what to say in response. So you've got to get above their attempt to get above everything all the time. And the way to do that, from what my perspective is, don't debate them. They're just masturbating to you taking the bait. Call them on that. Expose that that's what they're doing. So that's a general strategy of mine about these guys. You have to point out, you have to expose their whole MO. And she does that. She did that better than most, and she didn't take the bait from him. Ingenious.
She did it in real time as well.
That's right. In real time, to his face, which was the first time in 10 years he was challenged to his face on the public screen.
Yeah.
That is the first time.
He ate Hillary Clinton alive. The basket
What's
of
that?
He ate Hillary Clinton alive. The basket of deplorables.
That's right. And everything that doesn't kill them makes them stronger. That is, every one of these debates where they pull out their method acting and act like you're the problem, and you listen to them, they don't end up disappointed, and they don't end up with egg on their face. So I think it's important to do this. Focus on their overall MO. That these guys will say and do anything to pretend they're always right, righteous and mighty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you gotta focus on that. And then the other one is that these days I have been promoting giving them a taste of their own medicine. I don't believe it, but I'm telling them that they have lost, that they're doomed, that this is not going to work, that they're going to have egg on their face for having supported something, a fad that's tired. Notice I'm not pulling moral rank on that. I'm not saying you're going to be embarrassed because you supported a fascist. That won't work on them. But they do have their affirmation. The affirmation is what's driving them. And to call them out as chumps who are on a sinking ship and can't let go does seem to be a timely approach with these guys now. Now, am I successful with it? Yes, they don't fight me again. They go off and fight elsewhere. But they try it a few times, and I say, there he goes again. You proved my point. See, that's the thing about these guys. They're one-trick phonies. It's herobotics. It's robotically posing as heroes. So if you call them out on that trick, it may plant a seed that finally changes their mind. It disappoints them. That's the main thing. These are exhibitionists who thought they had a formula for dealing with everybody, and they encounter someone who's better at it than them. I've recently thought that it would be useful if we had the equivalent of rap battles in addition to debates. That is, right now they're preening like they are the master thugs who can trounce anyone, and it's fiction. And it's also laughable because basically what they've done is they've discovered a few generic formulas. I mean, I hear from these guys all the time, and it's all generic. It's no better than you're a poopy butt. I mean, it's not sophisticated rap battle stuff.
Yeah.
And I could cut.
It doesn't even rhyme.
Right, that's right. And I cut them hard, while also being loving with them. So I'll call him sweetheart. And I know it's passive aggressive. I believe passive aggressiveness has its place. In general, we have this problem with psychology that I probably contribute to, which is we come up with these terms that people, they don't pay attention to what the word means. They hear the negativity in it and start using it and abusing it that way.
Absolutely.
Right. No, I believe, what are you going to tell a slave that he can't be passive aggressive when active aggressiveness would get his family killed?
Hmm.
No, I'm not going to, I don't subscribe to that, nor does anybody really. So yeah, no, it's passive aggressive when I carrot stick them, when I say, darling, and then just carve them a new asshole. That is, verbal combat is the underexploited skill we need in our toolkit. And this is our opportunity to get it. I was 10 years before Trump, I was wishing for a Trump.
So it's
Here's
your
why.
fault. It was you.
Yeah, my
praying
fault.
for
No,
him.
no, no. No, I thought that if we survived him, he was be exactly the inoculant we needed.
Yeah. The
We
pendulum
needed the
swings the other way.
quintessential
Yeah.
asshole. We needed a quintessential asshole, who you couldn't mistake for actually having a policy. You know, you could mistake Stalin for a communist. It's very hard. I know some people are succeeding at it, but it's very hard to mistake Trump for actually having any beliefs or any cause. It's clearly all about him for most of us. For 60%, currently the chances of Kamala winning are 60%. Okay, they were 58 yesterday. They were 53 before the debate.
They were 45 for Biden.
Right, that's right, right.
Yeah.
And there's a way of turning this into like a blockbuster movie. I mean, the 11th hour rescue by a I mean, it's like Aliens almost. It's that good as a morality tale.
So the
If it
creature's going
wins,
to burst out of John
right.
Hurt's
So
chest.
so in a way, I am envisioning that future, and I know it's iffy, but I talk to them with a confidence that they have sported at us for the last decade, which is we've already won. It's over. Give up. You're a fool for not getting on board. I'm doing that at them these days.
Mm.
I've started to make, you know how people buy Hallmark greeting cards or greeting cards because they can't find words to say what they mean. I'm doing that now. I'm now making memes to post on in response to right wingers that are, because I'm hearing from clients who are tongue tied. They just don't know what to say, and rightly so. These guys, like I said, they're like exhibitionists. They have a way to make you wrong no matter what you say. So you need to offer up ways to deal with that. In the meantime, I'll go to Nevada and do get out the vote work. And I don't know how it's going to go. I'm glad I have a place in Mexico. Um, uh, um, but it's, yeah, that's my basic answer, which is I think we got to chide our own for vanity voting, the disdainful lesser than two evils, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein thing, which I still get from a few friends, even though Kamala entered. Certainly heard it from a bunch of people when Biden was running. And I understand it. I totally understand it. It's just a misunderstanding of what goes on with government. And it's, in a way, turning government into one's vanity project. It's another thing I've been telling Trumpists, which is, dude, you have so many places to jerk off these days. The production values are better than they've ever been. Why are you doing it in the public square about government? Go, self-love is important. Get a room. Do it. Don't let it go to your head like this. And do it about things that are fictional, because you don't get to do it about it's not patriotic to do it in the public square.
As Robert J. Lifton said, sport is the opiate of the masses. Get out there and do that.
Exactly. Sport's a great place to do it. Right. Okay. So
I
wish I had words to say, but I'm kind of left speechless. I have nothing more to say.
We will take a minute.
And that's another thing.
Exactly. Well, a moment's silence for
mindfulness.
Jeremy running out of words for 1
Breath,
second.
breath. It was just breath.
1 second.
The words are
Yeah.
all backed up.
You see, I don't know the answer to this question, but
I just offered one.
I'm
feeding you beauties.
All right, let's firstly pick up lesser of two evils. This is a cliche. It's a proverb. It's a way of saying something. It means choosing between two things that you think are bad, and saying,
no,
"I will choose the one."
Things that are disappointing.
Yeah,
basically.
But yeah, from my moral perception, things that are bad. So,
and I'm saying a different thing about it.
Yeah, and semiotically, we can go to all sorts of places about it.
No, we should. But my point about it is that if I said that the lesser of two evils was paying $10,000 for my foundation or living with a foundation that's broken, if I said lesser of two evils about compromising to save the environment or enduring the environment, I think I will have missed the point with that. With that frozen accident. Evil is not the word. It meant something different back when that phrase was coined. And besides, it was more ambiguous what it meant back then. And in the meantime,
yeah,
but
you see, I'm offering you a way out of this. I think, you have a PhD, I don't, but you know what a category error is as a consequence. And I think that the argument about the foundation is a category error. I'm not even going to go there. I'm saying, making it perfectly simple. I've got a choice between two fuckers, and I'm saying this one is worse, as far as I'm concerned, than that one. So, and in saying that throughout my life, politically, from the age of 18, which is 51 years ago, when I first became able to vote, I have always had to vote. I've never had any confidence in the person I was voting for. What I was saying is that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz actually do inspire confidence.
I understand what you're saying. That makes sense.
So that's that part. In terms of what we might do about
actually, but I don't want to lose one point in there. Okay.
How many points do you want to lose?
None. No, sorry. Let me take it back. Yours.
Too late. Bell's gone.
No, that's true. You said it right, but let me round out this idea before you dismiss it with your idea that it's a category error, which yes, I understand about.
Oh no, please don't. I don't want to know about the foundations of your damn house, Jeremy. Whether it's in Mexico or Nevada, they're foundations, man.
I don't either. That's the problem, is that people don't want to. Here's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, and I'm going to tie it into something interesting about marriage.
Oh, excellent.
We argue that in marriage we have to be more honest, and it's true. But it's also true that in marriage we have to be more dishonest. That is, at that degree of intimacy, of sustained intimacy, what happens from my perspective is that you walk a finer line. Because if you say something dishonest and are caught in it, it will cause lasting consequences for the relationship and for you. Yeah. And if you say something honest, it can cause lasting consequences. So,
no, your bum doesn't look big in that, love.
That's right, exactly. So, as Philip Larkin describes it, at this unique distance from isolation, it becomes still more difficult to find words at once true and kind, or not untrue and not unkind.
The greatest optimist that England has ever produced, Philip Larkin. But
what's that now?
The greatest optimist that England has ever produced, Philip Larkin. What a miserable sod he was.
Oh,
brilliant poet. But
no, I love his romanticism. I'm devoted to that kind. I have a pantheon of romanticism.
I look at the light come through the curtain every morning and think about death. So yeah,
that's right.
Thank you, Phil. Right. Grow up. We've all been there.
Right, and perhaps you even were a minute ago about how hard it's been to find people who meet your high standards in voting. Here's my
standards aren't high. Politicians are scumbags, so many of them. It's not that I've got some high ethereal standard. I would just like them to have my interests, the public's interests at heart.
Good. That's a great segue.
We've just had
wait, no, don't go there. Let me use that as a segue. Because you've been talking throughout this whole thing, and I haven't gotten a word in
It's
edgewise.
so true, Jeremy.
So
You're as
true, so
quiet as a
true.
mouse.
I
What can
know
I
it's
say?
true. I'm docile. No one could call me anything otherwise.
So true.
Um, but here's my connection to the marriage thing. A politician has to sustain intimacy with, in my country, 330 million people with very diverse standards. Um, uh, I had this out with Dan Ellsberg, the whistleblower who was,
Yeah.
and I had the good fortune to be his good buddy. We talked about everything, including marriage. Um, uh, and at one point he said, the politicians are lying. And I said, yes, but do you agree that politicians have to lie? And I said, and he conceded it. He said, yeah, actually they do. Because of the same thing I was talking about with marriage. That's a challenge whenever you want intimacy. The more intimacy you demand, the more you have to, the more it narrows. You can't afford to be honest. You can't afford to be dishonest. It's why I think of marriage as, what I love about us is that we can talk about everything or anything, provided we don't. Okay, provided we don't. Um, so so I recognize that as a burden on top of the burden of an increasingly corrupted system. Just the accumulation, it deepens like a coastal shelf, another Philip
Philip
Larkin line.
Larkin. Yeah.
Okay. But and I have to recognize that I'm one of 330 million people with very diverse views. I got interviewed by one of the big Trump supporting radio shows after I wrote an article said there's room for racism in America. It was fascinating because I wrote that article. It did quite well enough that they noticed it. And the next day, I played a gig. I'm a bassist um, with a African band at an African club, and I mean, the anxiety I felt about it. But what I was trying to say in this article is, we're fucking stuck together. We're stuck with each other, and racism is a human tendency, and we can't pretend that you could purge the country of of the racism. We have to deal with it. It was a fascinating interview. Um, uh, he didn't get it. He
No,
didn't want it.
oddly enough.
Oh no, it was
Yeah.
willful misunderstanding. But anyway, that's what I'm arguing is something to be taken to be kept in as context. Is that's what we're dealing with, a deeply corrupt system where politicians have always had to walk this tightrope between honesty and dishonesty in order to pull it off at all.
Yeah. And, I perhaps have a slightly more positive attitude, despite having had to choose the lesser of two evils for a lifetime. I
Oh
think,
God,
I think
make my skin crawl every time you say it.
yeah, I love it. Lesser of two evils. Lesser of two evils. um, Despite that, I think I perhaps have a slightly more positive attitude towards humanity. I do understand corruption, and we've studied it all our lives. And I mean, this very day, at the moment, I'm writing a book which does talk about the Nazis, and so I'm reading this wonderful book here, which I'll show you, called Hitler's Priestess, about Savitri Devi, who was one
wonderful,
of
wonderful.
great
That looks interesting.
demagogues. It's brilliant, and she's got to the point where she's been sent to prison in 1949 in Germany for distributing leaflets about how great Hitler is, and he's coming back any minute. And she's finally been arrested and sent down, and she wants them to execute her because martyrdom, hey, fantastic. And she ends up only serving 6 months in prison. But while she's there, she meets 3 women who become good friends of hers who worked in the concentration camps. And they just keep on complaining about the rotten things that the Allies have done to them. You got to go. So one of them was known for hurling babies into a furnace. And it's like, yeah, well, you've got to do that, obviously. So I am fully aware of, I'm going to use the word, the evil, go on, scratch, the evil that resides inside human beings. I don't take Jung's view that we've all got, or Joseph Campbell's view that we've all got all of this shit inside of us. And, given the wrong stimulus, any of us there, but for the grace of whatever it is, go I. I don't accept that. But
I do, by the way.
okay, it's inevitable at this point in the conversation. But I do have something to suggest. I do have something to suggest. After 40 years of talking people out of fanatical beliefs, I do have some
You do it.
clue of how you talk people out of fanatical beliefs. Because I've done it successfully
No,
hundreds
no,
of
no.
times. So,
I understand that. I understand that.
so,
But you were talking
and
about
and
positivity about humanity.
yeah, the fact that I think that there is corruption and therefore there will always be corruption. Yes, there's always entropy in the system. I think that we have seen in so many systems. We talked about Graeber and Wengrow at one point, who of course highlight many societies that have functioned in much better way than ours does. Societies like the Indus Valley, where for 700 years there was no war. Imagine a human society. The longest period my nation, England, has had without war in its history from the 9th century to now is 12 years. That's the best England has ever done. And that was during the reign of Charles I, who then provoked a civil war and lost his head somewhat. I am hopeful. I think that we do have the tools and we can make a change. But I think we're not using those tools. And in my field, where you are dealing with people, hardcore fanatics all the time, looking at the way that counter-terrorism has been done, this kind of childish approach to radicalization, which has basically grown terrorist groups massively. There were 479 people who we might say were in Al-Qaeda when 9/11 happened. Within a couple of years, our politicians, evil or not, had grown that into the tens of thousands by their idiocy. And it killed off in Iraq 750,000 people, in Afghanistan 150,000 people who probably wouldn't have died otherwise. So, I'm going to label that evil and make you cringe. But I think
No. I don't. That doesn't make me cringe.
It's the lesser of two evils.
You have to know what makes.
What
me
about
cringe.
the greater of two evils? Does that make you?
No. So let me respond to that. I think it's beautiful because it distinguishes between two approaches that I think are important. I've made videos about it. There's optimism and neg optimism. Positive optimism and
we've
negative.
Talked about in a previous video.
Okay, good. So I won't go into depth about it, but you make a fairly pat case. We are capable of doing good because there's precedent of it.
Capable of doing better than we are doing.
Right.
Okay. You seem to be saying that the system will always be corrupt, and we have to just accept that.
No. I'm not falling for the naturalist fallacy. But I'm also challenging the normalist fallacy, which is that since it's basically a fall from grace myth. We were good and we've gone bad. And I want to argue against it by suggesting that there's a problem with what I'll call romantic humanism. So I got to tell you, a lot of my friends, or at least ex-friends, are positive optimists. I'm having it out with one right now who's very much this way. The founder of Move On, it's a big successful organization in the United States, who's very much about finding common ground by being nice to each other, by connecting human to human, which I say I agree with one-thirdedly. It's one of the ways to do it, and you have advocated it, and it often works. The timing for when it works and when it doesn't is an interesting issue. That's what we're talking about with improvisation.
I'm not talking about being nice to serial killers. I'm not talking about necessarily being nice to
that's right. Okay, so the question then becomes, where do you draw the line, and how do you prevent a serial killer from becoming a serial killer? And I would say that abuse is one of the tools in your toolkit. That is, to be nasty to them sometimes works, sometimes backfires. Just like being nice sometimes.
I don't believe in that. I believe in restraining them from doing things, but I don't.
I don't
believe in sticking pins in them or making them pinch themselves before they have a vaccination.
But what I want to suggest is that there's still a difference for me between, if I were in charge of the world, I'd put good people in charge, and what's the most we can do with what we're dealt. And what we're dealt includes, so one of the things you said that made my skin crawl just a second ago was that you don't believe with Jung and Campbell that we have these dark sides in us.
We
I'm
have
arguing,
every negative potentiality within us. Yeah, I don't believe
right,
that.
and I'm not clear.
I'm not Ted Bundy. No matter what you do to me, I am not going to go and murder 100 women. Yeah. So that idea of there's a human
I
there's
know.
a human type with a shadow and an anima or an animus or all of this, it's just romantic nonsense. It's fairy stories. All the gods are within us, Campbell says. All 800 of those tendencies. I do not have the Black Kali, Demeter, Kybele, Diana, Artemis. I don't have those forces inside me. I would have noticed by now. It doesn't mean I can't be horrid, but it means that I'm not going to disembowel you because you've annoyed me, because you've said your skin's crawling. And I can't stand it when people say their skin's crawling. It's offensive.
Does it make your skin crawl?
Thankfully not. It doesn't cause horripilation. I'd have thought that'd be the word you'd use.
Okay, but all right. So you're a grand fellow. We've established that.
I'm lovely.
In the meantime,
I'm not as bad as Ted Bundy. That's what.
Thank you. Right, that's right. Right. There's always someone worse than me.
Or Jeffrey Dahmer.
Got it. But here's what I want to get at, which is
and it's not worse than, it's worse off than in the cliche. Let's just get our proverbs down.
Yeah,
I'm not saying there's always somebody worse than me. There are
right,
people worse than you.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, I want to plant my idea. I don't care. It's completely fine if you disagree with it, but I do want to make clear
We're here
what
to
I'm
plant
saying.
ideas. That's what we're
Plant
doing.
ideas. That's
planting.
Right. Even if they're wrong.
Yeah, we can
okay.
think about them and discuss them, and that's what we're doing, which is good.
So John Attack, how do you say it? Attack?
Atack, under the oak tree, at oak. Atack.
Atack. Wonderful. What a wonderful name. It's
only half of my surname. My surname's actually Caven Atack.
And I love that it's the opposite of you because you're not on the attack.
Well, I do live under an oak tree, so it is in fact accurate.
That's true, but you're tactful, not attackful. So my point, and I do have one.
Good.
Is that John?
It is rude to point. You do know that, don't you?
No, I do, and yet we do it all the time. Indexicality. It's fundamental to language. But what I'm trying to get across is, what I want to get across. Yeah, if I said hard right now, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. If I said hard and pointed to the table, or I said the table is hard, that's all pointing. Kids learn by pointing. But anyway, that's not my point. My point is different from the point about pointing. My point is,
you've been appointed to make the point,
John. We don't know how. I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer either, right? Okay, so there are extreme versions, and one can take the extreme version, and one often does. I remember asking this spiritual guy once the difference between good and evil, and he said, "Well, evil is Hitler and good is Mother Teresa at the time." No, I know. Set that aside. Which is
saintly narcissist of the year.
It's easy to point to the extremes. They make black and white distinction easy, but the gray areas are messier. And what I want to suggest about me, I'll talk about me because I don't want to cause your skin to crawl. No, I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer. But then if I had been, I like this tautology. If I were him, I'd do exactly what he's doing. If I had those circumstances, including the evolutionary ones that led to his birth, and all the rest, I could become him. Now, it doesn't haunt me. No. I could. That's right. And so I don't rule it out. I mean, the origins of all of my work, all of it, 30 years ago was the mantra, I wouldn't put it past me. I wouldn't put it past me. And it leaves me in a state that I wish for more of us. If you don't want to be an asshole, expect some anxiety. I'm a hyper-conscientious brute. I am extremely mouthy. and I have a very active conscience,
mm,
and that they live in tension, and I want it that way.
mm,
That is, I often doubt whether I've gone too far. I also doubt whether I've not gone far enough. That's where I want to be. That's the equanimity I seek.
mm.
It's not some set point in the middle. It's being equally anxious about opposite excesses. That's where I live. That's where irony lives. That's where fallibilism lives, which I describe as no matter how confident I am in a bet, I remain still more confident that it is a bet.
Mm.
That all I
Yeah,
get is bets.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a good
So
way of putting it.
yeah, so I would so that's where I live. And that's my point, and I did have one.
Yeah. Um, I just want to say that, and come back to the point, which
Yeah.
is where we started, which is what can we do about this? Now, I take on board your description of the condition, and I take on board your response to it, but I'm still absolutely focused on this one simple thing. I do believe that if Trump and Vance win the election on the 5th of November, we are in for a shitstorm. I
It
think,
goes without saying, but bears
yeah,
repeating.
yeah, exactly. The Project 2025 is
Sure.
real,
No, it's clearly
and
that would be the end of the world in big ways.
it could lead to martial law in America. It could lead to
No,
dictatorship
no,
in
no.
America.
That's exactly where they'd want it. I've been saying for a decade now, that that Trump isn't Hitler. He would be if he could be. He just got to go slow. We're not used to it.
Yeah, and I mean the point in history with Hitler, who was not an intelligent man, was not a thoughtful man, was not a philosophical man. He was a driven lunatic. You know, he had something profoundly wrong with him in his perception of the world. And he rose to power. You know, Ludendorff and Hindenburg sort of went, oh, yeah, we can put him in there. He'll be a good puppet for us. Now, the problem with Trump is he could be a good puppet. And, you know, it's just not a good idea. I don't want it to happen. I don't want it to happen.
Obviously, I don't either. And
Yeah.
I
So let me, if you would, you'd be
I
so
would.
very kind, if you would.
Kindness isn't in my repertoire.
Well, maybe one day.
Darling, I love you.
Maybe as a Jungian.
Go ahead, keep going. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead. I do,
Yeah.
but I don't.
Yeah, I know. It's tough, isn't it? I found that there are ways of dealing with fanatics.
Good.
And one-on-one, I can tell you that in the 1990s, there was no Scientologist who spoke to me who did not choose to leave Scientology. Now, talking with other people in this neck of the business, that's very unusual. That's very unusual. Now, it took me 7 years after I left, and I was not a core member. I was not a live-in member. I was not abused and humiliated. I may be the only person who wasn't, frankly. But when I left Scientology, I had this, it took me 7 years to find out how to have a conversation with any Scientologist. And as I say, improvisation is the beginning of that conversation. So it's, it's a dance. And you're going to have to be in real time. You're going to have to deal with it, and you're going to come away later and say, oh, I wish I'd said that, or what have you. Or I wish I hadn't said that, as the case may be. But I found out there were certain principles along the way. A woman doing a master's degree, she's a psychiatrist, she was doing a master's degree in the psychology of coercive control at Salford University. And her dissertation was on whether people such as me, who had dealt with fanatical cult members, might be useful in de-radicalizing, that we might be able to have some clue about how you do that. And she came to the conclusion that we probably would. And there are certain principles that I do aspire to.
Tell me the principles. Get to the principles.
Absolutely. I'm on my way there. Don't rush me.
I believe you. But you have to
We
first give your credentials. You got a little throat clearing's good.
Yeah. We gave you an hour and a half.
We've established your credibility.
Explain your principles. Yeah. But it's important.
I didn't take the whole hour and a half.
Yeah, but we will be, it'll all be timed later. There'll be a statistical account of how many times you
I
word
like
use the
those. Those
word.
are useful.
They are,
I
aren't they?
talk I talk more than you, but then I'm the
Yeah,
interviewee.
but
Go ahead.
that's interesting. You think about it that way. I think about it as a conversation.
Good.
I'm
Excellent. Me
not.
too. Me
Yeah,
too. Me too.
just that. But I found that there was a particular aspect of Scientology that interested me, and that was that I met three people who, in 1969, had seen articles in the Sunday Times by an Australian journalist called Alexander Mitchell, which exposed to the world the fact that L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, had performed magical rituals with a disciple of Aleister Crowley in 1946 to bring into being the beast, the Antichrist, and Armageddon. That's a starting point. These three people had read that in the newspaper, and what did they do? They joined Scientology. What? Yeah, they joined Scientology. They went, oh, that sounds good. I'll go and do that. So that was like, oh, okay. So saying how sinister this thing is, how dreadful this thing is, in and of itself, doesn't seem to work. It'll work with some people, but in fact, Scientology had tremendous recruiting, largely because of government inquiries in the newspaper reporting it. So they went from having 500 members in 1963 through the Victoria Inquiry, Canadian, South African, Rhodesian as it was then, and the UK Inquiry in 71. By the end of that, they'd got like 30 or 40,000 members. It all been published because it was sinister, because that was enough to attract people to it. And so I went, okay, what we need is South Park. What we need is to say, yes, what you're involved with is sinister and it's also ridiculous. And I think that that's a very positive aspect of what you've been doing, showing that this thing it's silly, it's ridiculous, it's also sinister, it's dangerous. So that's the starting point for the public dissemination of this, to advise people that what they're doing contains both of these elements, and that therefore, to use your expression earlier, they're going to get egg on their face. They are going to lose credibility at some point because, as you say, they've already lost. Now, I don't have the answer to this particular problem. I can speak at great length, and if stimulated, will do so, about how I've approached individuals and what I've done that has helped them. My intention is not, and so this differs. My intention is not to convert somebody or deconvert somebody, to stop them believing or help them to believe or something like that. My intention is to give them more opportunity to define what they wish to believe, or how they wish to be relieved, if you prefer your formulation, to think a bit more expansively, to consider information, hard information that they didn't have, and to then be able not to think as I do, because that's a really foolish thing to do. Nobody knows that better than me. Not to believe as I do. I'm not interested in selling my belief, but to arrive at a belief that is more, or a relief that is more suitable to them, that will cause them less harm, that will be in their better interests. And what I see with Trumpsters, Trumpistas, Trumpists, is they're doing something that's going to hurt them. They're believing something, it's like with Scientology, you're believing something that's you're going to end up psychologically enslaved and without any money and on the street, or you're going to be one of the rich Scientologists, and these people are so like Trump. There were some people boasting last November. They came here to England for a little performance, to say that they had given this family $53 million to Scientology. And you sit there and go, you did what? You could have done some good in the world, and instead you are boasting about having given this amount of money. Sinister and ridiculous, which I think you've absolutely got to in the work you've done. Is there somewhere we can go from that? And this is an open question to anybody who's watching, where we can actually convince people that they ought to go to Taylor Swift concerts instead of voting for Trump, or, that there is some improvisation in debate and discussion, such as the discussion we've just had, where you can get somebody to, you can rattle the bolts that hold together their misconceptions and make them want to change their mind about it, because it's kind of urgent now. There are what, 50 days left, 49 days left. So I'm not saying I have a solution. I'm saying I have solved a similar problem. And
Right. So I'd like you to hear you espouse your principles around it. So far, the principle I've heard is that you, I think you expose them to how it's sinister and silly. Is
ridiculous.
right. Okay. And do you have other principles that you operate by when you do the successful work?
Yeah, sinister and ridiculous works as a general tool if you're not on a one-on-one situation. That so as I say, South Park, come out of the closet, Tom Cruise, that wonderful piece of art that they
Sure.
produced
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
Scientology.
Beautiful. Those guys are
Scientologists really
geniuses.
believe this. I'm very pleased
Yeah.
actually that the version they give of the secret teachings of Scientology in there came from me, and so
There you go.
that's
That's great. That's
worth
fabulous.
boasting about.
Did you have contact with those guys?
No, it's a version that I put into the record in the 1990s that they drew from. It can also be found in an Oxford University Press book about Scientology, which is packed with nonsense, misspells my name, and gives a posting that I made on the internet describing the contents of the secret material, which I finished by saying, humbly tendered as a gift to mankind. And unfortunately, the academic experts on Scientology who wrote this book didn't realize that's a quotation from Ron Hubbard about when he released OT3. So they thought that was me. But there you go.
Okay, but I still want to hear
Yeah, and I'm going to tell
some
you.
principles.
I'm going to tell you. Calm
Well,
down,
you're
calm
a
down.
little
I know you're
long-winded, my
excited. I
friend.
know you're excited, but I am going to tell you. The approach I take, as I say, has been rather like a hostage negotiator. And Chris Voss, who was the FBI's head of negotiations, his book about it is
Yeah.
very interesting because there are a lot of parallels in this way of treating with people. The first is, and this is where you and I would, you are disappointing these people. I want to dissuade them. I don't necessarily
Well,
want to persuade them to vote for Kamala Harris, but I would like to dissuade them from voting for Trump,
well, no, I would like to do that too. And a minute ago, you said something that sounded like you didn't want to necessarily change their mind. I think that's relevant. I want to talk about that at some point if I ever get a
Yeah,
word in edgewise.
phew,
But
that's dubious, Jeremy. We're probably going to have to come back to that because we've already been waxing
I
lyrical.
know we have to.
There has to be an
I've
end to
used
this
up
at some point.
my talking chit. That's
Your
right.
credits, but in simple terms, that my approach is, when I was doing interventions back in the 90s, the early 90s with Scientologists, I would go into the room and I'd notice that exit counselors, I hate that term because exit was an organization for suicide in this country. Exit counseling, that's not a good idea. No, don't do it. But I noticed that the people who call themselves exit counselors or interventionists they'd often take like the whole family and the dog and the cat if the Haitians hadn't eaten them. And there'd be this kind of milieu control where you've got this poor, based on the Alcoholics Anonymous intervention and all this. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of not doing that. I will go in with one person, family member, friend, what have you. And I will start the conversation by getting on side. And the getting on side in this situation was very easy. It's saying, your mum, brother, grandma, whoever thinks that you've been brainwashed into a cult. I'm here to help you explain the reality of the situation. And amazing though it may seem, that always worked. That the person, as long as they didn't know my name, as long as they hadn't read what Scientology said about me, then we were in trouble. Have you been declared suppressive? They'd say if they'd heard that. And I have. And so first of all, saying, I'm with you to explore this situation. Where have we got to? And that, with a Trumpist, is sort of inviting them a little bit, possibly to explain what they're saying. But what we would do then, very swiftly, was show a video called Captive Minds, Hypnosis and Beyond. And it's a terrible 1982 Canadian video with people with incredible lapels and hair and stuff. It's really risible. But I don't know another place where you have such a clear definition of hypnotism and separating out the compliance, the groupthink, what's acceptable in the military and the Catholic convention, and what a cult group does. And the primary separation that's made is the cult group will lie to you. They won't say, if you take the novitiate, these horrible things will happen to you. If you go to war, you might be killed, which is the horrible training in the nunneries, and which Mother Teresa was one of the worst of. Let's not even go there. You are told you're going to do this. The cult group's not going to tell you that. They're going to lie to you. They're going to say it's all for your benefit. So you show somebody something about certain fundamental principles of psychology, which for some reason don't seem to be taught in universities where psychology is being taught. Certain, there was a point in the 70s where the 90 US universities, only 6 faculties even mentioned hypnotism. And there's still all of this sort of stuff about, well, yeah, we've got some neurology behind it now. There are different states of mind. I don't like to call them altered states of mind. But when somebody realizes that their state of mind can be altered, that can be very useful. And and you've given many terms to describe that situation in the Trump follower. To then go on to say, okay, we're going to look at a group that is fanatical. And I used to show video, My Dance Is Now Complete, about the Rajneeshis in Oregon, which was a much better piece of work than Wild Wild Country, because you actually saw how people were suffering in this group. And then the Scientologists will say, that's nothing like the group I'm in. And then you can go on to show them The Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard, the only hostile interview with Ron Hubbard. It's only 20 minutes long. Again, it's on my channel. And where Hubbard he just makes an idiot of himself. He sits there blinking at the camera and says he had no second wife, so he had a first wife and a third wife. When he's asked about reincarnation and if he believes in it, he hesitates. And then Charlie Nairn interviewing him says, but your followers believe in it. And he says, oh, yeah, they believe in it. Yeah. He's asked about his Swiss bank accounts. He says, there are no. And then he stops and says, well, I do have one Swiss bank account. He makes a fool of himself. At that point, you have brought about cognitive dissonance. The Scientologist has been shown that there are ways of getting into your head that they weren't aware of. And, we've since then had Derren Brown, who's demonstrated and exemplified just about every trick that can be used on people. Bless him. They've learned then about another group that is fanatical. So they've got a parallel, a point of comparison. And you've then taken them into their own group to something. And what's really happened is that the atmosphere in the room has changed. That this person is no longer with the ego defense barriers up. You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Everything you're saying is wrong. They're curious about what they're being told. And you can see the moment of change in the person. So to adapt such a thing, we're going to take every MAGA supporter and do these things. But at the moment, the US media is doing a remarkable job of ridiculing the Trump movement and some of the evidence. I mean, watching some of the news anchors, watching J.D. Vance the other day talking about the geese, the reports about the geese, and the news anchor just stopping him and saying, no, this is what's actually happened. I've been very impressed with the level of people like Rachel Morrow, for example. But is there something that we can pull out of this that, I've seen face to face many times, that you can take a fanatic and get them to reconsider their belief? Is there something that between us and our audience that we can get to that is a way of talking to people that will make them go, actually, I'm not going to vote for him? So that's the question I leave this discussion with, I think.
Well, okay. So you said a lot, and
I did.
And I want to pick up on just a couple little threads briefly, because we'll probably be coming to a close sometime soon.
This will end for anybody that's watching this. This is not eternal. This
Eternal.
video.
No, it's not eternal. Though in a way
In
it
a
is
way.
eternal. It is. It's a live question. Uh, so I will take from what you said and play with something you said early on about how your practice, which is this business about how are you going to defend your beliefs against your grandmother's claim. That's an intriguing new possibility. I'm always looking for new techniques because I don't believe my techniques are adequate. Um, uh, I I don't. It's silly and it is sinister, but I actually want to pay more attention to something else, which is that it's alluring, that's attractive. That is, this is a very big issue for me. That is, I think the word brainwashing is too general.
It defines a specific process that occurred in Russia and then subsequently in China under Malenkov, under Liu in China. And
but it's not
it
all
works,
that's got.
and it's got physical violence involved in it.
Yeah,
It is
that's
not
right. Yeah, so bear with me. I'm talking for a minute. Okay, so I think we have to appreciate how attractive this is and not just shudder at its attractiveness. That is it's freedom from doubt, what I call brain purging. And I experienced it myself. I was like you. No, it was, our situation was different. When I joined the commune, the farm, I don't think it was actually a cult. You could leave it easily. And we ridiculed ourselves. We could make fun of ourselves. Those would be two key symptoms for me of. But I was cultish. No, let me talk for a minute.
No, we've used the word cult.
Let me talk.
You didn't think it was a cult.
Let me talk. Let me talk.
Jeremy, I'm not gonna be shouted down.
I get to finish the sentence.
You can finish the sentence.
I was cultist in it. Yeah. And many of us were.
Yeah.
Bear with me a second.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I was cultish in it in that I felt total relief from doubt and anxiety. That was intriguing to me. That is my point here, which is that there are many reasons why it would be self-serving to treat alcoholism as an addiction or cult membership as as being infected by something, and it alleviates guilt. And I'm saying we have to pay attention to how alluring it is. It is really attractive to human beings to find a way to offload doubt, to externalize doubt. Okay, so
as you said in the videos that hopefully people will have watched of yours.
Now that I finished that what we call it a run-on sentence, please say what you were going to say.
Yeah, it's this word cult that dictionary definition, Oxford English Dictionary, first usage 1711. Cult is a devotion to a leader or a doctrine or a thing. That's all the word means. And so, yes, you were in a cult, but was it a destructive cult? We come into, words are so important to you and so important to me. That word doesn't mean what people use it to mean. It's like when somebody says, I was depressed, and they don't mean they were depressed. They mean they were unhappy. If you talk to them about endogenous depression, they don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. But,
so in this way,
I'm going to continue. Okay. And I'm going to make this clear as well.
Yeah. I'm
an epistemological nominalist. That is, I know that words, you could say that this word equals that meaning. It's a Saussurean approach to language. I don't buy it. It's fine if we define it that way.
If the word cult has no meaning, then we can't have a conversation about it, Jeremy.
No, that's right. So
we agree upon a meaning. We start with the dictionary.
That's what an epistemological nominalist does.
Good.
Is they say,
so you accept the Oxford Dictionary definition.
Okay. Yeah? But no, we don't go with the Oxford Dictionary definition necessarily. Just like I don't go with the general term narcissist the way we do. I make clear what my operational definition is, and I don't. So yeah, you can correct me on that, but I don't want to lose the point I was on. I had a point. I had a point.
Yep,
again.
do it.
Okay.
Do it. Let's hear.
All right. So, that's a big part of what I end up thinking we have to get across to these people is that they are taking comfort in this.
Yeah.
They're taking easy comfort. The moral standard that it's evil, or I forget the word used. It starts with a D. Um,
Destructive,
no, you had a different word that was that.
dangerous.
No, you had two words. One of them was that it's
Oh,
silly.
sinister, and no, not silly at
Sinister. So
all.
it didn't
And
start with sinister.
I would walk
Sinister.
away from the word silly. It's not adequate for this. Ridiculous.
Fine. Fine. That's not my point here. My point here is that in addition to it being sinister, it didn't start with a D. I don't know what was going on in my mind.
Ridiculous.
No, what I'm saying is, in addition to saying it's sinister, which is a moral judgment from the outside, I want to point out that it's attractive, that it's appealing. Okay, and perhaps that's what the videos did. So there were rich Scientologists. You talked about them. There were also the richness that people felt from Scientology, and that's where I want to focus. Now, you talked about milieu control, and I want to say this is one of the challenges in our current situation. It's a challenge across society in general, which is that what goes around comes around doesn't necessarily come around in a society as big and ungainly as ours. I mostly encounter Trumpists online. They can leave anytime. They have easy exit, so that makes them especially slippery. What you said about Hubbard, the video in which he is stumped, or at least shown egg on his face, you could say, we have far too little of that. And I'll give you a simple example of that. I make AI images that involve Trump, and I've noticed that AI has a whole lot of trouble making him look like a loser. And I think that's part of his process, and a place where the media has really fallen short. There are a few places where he has looked like like a loser, but in general, the articles that point out that he's a loser are illustrated with images of the kind where he looks tough and Mussolini-like. Okay, so that's one of the challenges we have, is that it's hard to find video or illustrations of him being punked. That's why I'm grateful for the debate the other day, though I will also say that the people who support him don't necessarily see that he was beaten in that, and he's certainly spinning it that way. These are challenging times, but I would say that in answer to your question, the big question, the overarching question, I've suggested a couple of things that I find useful to do now with these people, which is to point out that they're doomed, even though I know we're on the edge. That is to not fret. That is, that's all background for me. That's all assumed that the threat is huge. I'm not playing there. I'm not fretting. I'm not hand-wringing over that. And to tease them about the ridiculousness and disappoint them. Because, yeah, my overall goal is to get them to not vote for Trump, but I also know I have the courage of my insignificance to them. That is, I know that I have limitations in my interactions with them. They can duck out anytime and will.
Oh, yeah.
They are complete, like the Scientologists, they vilify opposition. And that's where the movement, you could say, started, is that it's a pre-prejudice. It's basically deciding that anybody who challenges me is a person of bad character and therefore is not worth even listening to. It's a very useful technique that any of us can employ.
And we all have some tendency to employ.
Right. And so doing the most we can with what we're dealt between now and the election is my only option. And those are some ideas about what to do during it, in addition to get out the vote work. That's where I land. And is it enough? I don't know. I don't know. I don't even really care. Remember that I'm a guy who thinks that comfort in our own skin feels like our primary priority, not getting along with reality, but just feeling comfortable in our own skin. That feelings are stronger than thought. This was my argument about romantic humanism. Romantic humanism is the belief that we are completely different from animals, because we have reason, and reason controls everything. It's what I call robo-envy. It's wishing that we were simple enough beings that you could simply reprogram yourself with a new thought. Just start believing this and you'll automatically become that. So romantic humanism is this hope. Remember, I described myself and Philip Larkin as romantic cynics. I'm deeply romantic. I really do uh, have hope for humanity. But I'm also a negative optimist in that I'm assuming we've got these problems that are built right into us, including brain purging. That is that appetite to alleviate doubt. So so how to deal with it? I'm just assuming that's my circumstance. That's what we're stuck with. And these were some techniques that I'm employing these days. They wouldn't have worked a while ago. One of the things, and we're going to be dealing, my work, I feel like the last 10 years, I'm like a tax accountant in March. That is, this is my season. Our taxes in the United States are done in April. So
Same here. Same here.
You can't contact an accountant during that time. They're too busy. I've been in that state for 10 years, and I will be in it after Trump is gone, because we have a strong tendency to identify the problem with the dogma in particular, or the dogmatist. And when he's gone, good riddance, and we can get on with our lives. I get that. I get why we would do that. I think it's a real problem for us. We haven't seen the overall pattern, which is why I love talking with you so much. You're someone who sees the overall pattern. You are one of the guys who's drawing the parallels between Scientology and Trumpism, and we've been slow to do that. This is a problem that comes up over and over. The point about brain purging is there will always be alcohol. There will always be people who want to play cult leader. You can't do anything about their existence other than do your part to inoculate yourself against it. I wouldn't
like Trump and Hitler, as he said, not drink.
What's that?
Like Trump and Hitler, not drink. But
right. No, that's right. That's right.
Oh.
That is ultimately it comes down to personal responsibility, and it's very hard to get people to take personal responsibility once they've gotten addicted to this drug, the cultish drug. That's all. And there I'm using the word cult by my definition, which is it's crude. I think of it as the plural of asshole. It's a gaggle of geese, cult of assholes. It's just a plural version of it. Because what an asshole's a terrible term. I hate it. I mean herobot. I mean absolutist. I don't mean extremist except in one sense. So one of the challenges with the word extreme is that everybody's extreme by some standard. We're all extreme by the people of the Middle Ages or the Middle East. But the version of extreme is one can't have too much of X. Ill-defined X, but X is whatever I like. That is, you turn it up to infinity.
It's your X-dream.
Right, that's right. So I've redefined moron as someone who says you could just pile more and more on.
More Ron, more Hubbard.
More whatever word sounds lofty to you. A lot of my work lately has been what's the active ingredient in the Kool-Aid? It's loaded, load-bearing, loose last words. Loaded meaning it sounds really positive or really negative. So I'm a patriot. They're woke. Those load-bearing meaning you can rest your entire identity on them. They're loosely defined by design, as you wouldn't want to define it, and they're claims of last words. So how to deal with that remains a major challenge, and will after Trump if he does lose.
And sorry, but by last words you mean a finality, not the words that people speak on their deathbed.
No, that's right. That's right. You got it right. You got it right. Yep. That's right. That's right. And remember my last word paradox, which is that words enable us to claim last words that further words make impossible. And that's where the ironess lives. That's where no matter how confident I am in a bet, I remain still more confident that it is a bet.
It is a bet.
That's the same point. And now I've made my point and said my piece, and you get the floor, and we can wrap it up, my friend.
Yes.
I love these conversations. I hope you don't mind that I get a little Jeremy sometimes.
No, it's good to know we're alive. It's good to
Yeah,
know that we
it's
can
true. It's true.
just
And I like feistiness. There's a certain spice in it. To some extent, philosophers understand this. You listen really carefully to each other, totally free to disagree.
hmm,
You know.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and as long as the disagreement is relatively agreeable, then
Well, truth emerges from disagreements among friends. That's how I
yeah,
feel.
yeah, that's a very good point. It's a very good way of saying it. Yeah, so I think we've covered the ground. I want to get this video out quickly, so I'm not going to stick it in Patreon. I think this is a quite important issue. I would like to say that my friend Stephen Hassan is just released a new edition of his book, The Cult of Trump, which really didn't get the airplay it should have got when it came out in the first edition, because he picks up some very essential issues, and it's a very well written book. I was, very pleased with it when I read it. But following on from what Bandy Lee has been saying all of these years, and the damage and difficulty, the dangerous case of Donald Trump, which also has went to a second edition, that we can arm ourselves by understanding these ideas better. But what we're looking for is a magic bullet whereby we can
Right.
persuade.
Right.
Yeah. So
Magic,
anything I know that there's no such thing.
but we want them. That's the romantic cynic. That is,
Exactly.
yeah, it's a fruitful exercise in futility, is how I think of it.
Yes. It
Looking
keeps
for the
us
last word on how to deal with them.
keeps us off the streets, and
Right. That's right.
basically.
And it's co-evolutionary, because whatever strategies we come up with, they will co-evolve alternatives to it. I want to mention, if we're talking about the same book, a book called The Peculiar Case of Donald Trump.
The dangerous case of Donald Trump was Bandy Lee and 37 mental health professionals
Got
and
it.
one
Okay.
lawyer.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes. No. Okay. So this is a different book. There's another book called The Peculiar Case of Donald Trump. It was written by a guy, a personality psychologist, academic, well written. I wrote to him afterward because he's arguing that Trump is an episodic man, which is a man who lives in the moment,
Mm.
moment to moment.
Mm.
Um, uh, and
Erasing the past as he goes.
Right,
Yeah.
and yet the book didn't once touch on the possibility that that's an advantage.
Mm.
Um, and this is once again to my point. And so
Mm.
when I wrote to the author, he said, "Huh, I hadn't thought of that,"
Mm.
which was kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
But this is where the problem with Sinister comes in.
Mm.
There's once we've decided to call something immoral, it's hard for us to look at the ways it actually plays out and pays out. So people say crime doesn't pay. That's not true. Crime pays ridiculously well if you get away with it.
Mm.
So does being an episodic man. It pays beautifully
Mm.
if you can get away with it.
Mm.
The question then for us, and this is my closing remark, and I'm going to say it with the profundity that it warrants, is that we have to start to look at how it pays off. It's not just
Mm.
ridiculous and sinister, it's attractive.
Yeah,
Humans
absolutely.
love,
That
yeah.
that has to be added to our understanding in trying to dissuade somebody from doing something. It may or may not be viable to tell them that it's attractive. I think they already know that, but it is vital that we, in doing what we're doing.
I didn't mean to start another one, but I want to say they don't know it. We
Well,
need to not feel,
they
no,
have they have been attracted.
they have been attractive, and they
Mm.
haven't noticed that they've been attracted for these affirmational reasons.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to
Mm.
get across.
Mm.
It's important to me to say that. It wouldn't help for me to say what you're doing is sinister. That has been impotent against these guys because they're sort
Look,
of.
no. You see, it wasn't at any point sinister. It was sinister and ridiculous. That what I realized was if you go back and replay what we've been through, I'm saying that sinister didn't work. That the people were recruited because it was sinister.
Ah, got it.
If
So what you're trying to say is, needless to say, it goes without saying that it's sinister, but it's ridiculous. That's your main point with them.
It's combining those two things. It's letting it be known that this thing is sinister because it's dangerous to you. You know, it's gonna bite you in the ass.
Which is,
But
I would use a
but you
different
will
word than sinister.
you'll also get egg on your face. It will also, when you fall and hurt your coccyx, you will also be laughed at. And that's been a really interesting dynamic for me in working with people, that realizing that they'll lose face, they'll be belittled, particularly strong in my
Good.
culture.
Then we've come to the same place about it. That is, we take on board that it's sinister. The question is, what's the value to them? Comfort in their skin. Egg on the face is not comfortable to your skin, on your skin. And how to get that across becomes the theme, and that's also why I'm laughing at them as if they fell for a fad that jumped the shark, as we say in the United States, years ago, which means that it's failing miserably. They're in a tailspin. You're going to have egg on your face. I know it, even though I don't know it. They could end up being my stormtroopers. The stormtroopers who take me down. But I will say it with a confidence that matches theirs, to give them a taste of their own medicine.
Absolutely, teach them a lesson.
That's right, because I'm one of the good guys, and
Yeah.
if I were in charge of the world, everything would be wonderful.
Yeah, Harry Seacombe had a lovely song about that. If I ruled the world, every day would be the
I liked
first
him a
day of
lot.
spring.
He was good. He was good.
Oh, Seagoon! Yeah, he was a great man. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Good.
I leave feeling elevated and
I'm
levitated.
delighted to hear that. I'm delighted to hear that, my friend. And I will see you next time I see you. Anytime. I'm around.
Great. Well, we'll close this recording. Say thank you to everybody. Write lots of comments. We will both try and read them, as long as there aren't 1,000. And any sensible suggestions, start your post with sensible suggestions so that we'll know to read those ones. If you've got a stupid suggestion, start it by saying stupid suggestion. But
that always works.
Thank you very much to the 3 people who've managed to get to the end of this. And we'll see you again the next time. Thanks so much. And thank you, Jeremy.
All right.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.